Good morning, everyone. This is Francis, Martin, and Curt for the Natural Law Institute. This is our office hours, which we conduct, I think, every other week.
Yes.
We took a little bit of a break this summer because we kind of got overloaded, if I remember correctly.
And also, it kind of hinders on me since I'm the one running these, and I was out of the country.
Yes. Well, that's the problem with being indispensable, Francis.
Well, that's a you say it like it's a good thing, but for an ops guy, that's a failure because, like, my ultimate success is supposed to be I can walk away and the things will still keep on running.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Well, it's great if you get paid for it.
I do this for free.
Well, as do most of us. All right. We have quite a few. How many questions backed up here?
Our backlog is now running at 23.
I didn't even add more from the table.
Oh, okay. So there's more.
Wow. So we're gonna get through them. I'm a little. I feel like it's Martin Day because all the questions are really Martin questions, and he's going to answer them correctly, and I have not much to add to them. Well, but we'll see. And so the way this works is you Francis leaves a link in the comments in the, what is it called?
The video description.
The video description.
Yeah, I create a placeholder for the next live stream, usually later, later today. And then there's a link to a Google form on there, and you just type your questions in there.
And
it's in this stream too. It's in all of them.
Oh, right. People put them in this ask questions in the stream as well. Is that what you mean?
No, I mean the form is in every description.
All right. So then usually what happens is Martin gives the correct answer, and then I spend a lot of time adding color to it. But anyway,
I want to add one more thing. So all the paid analyze Substack subscribers, I frequently send out email with direct link to this meeting invite, so that they have, as part of their membership benefit, they can join this meeting and ask questions live, to put Curt and Martin in a hot seat, so to speak.
So I think we're just fine with that. We just got an invitation to be on a show here. Hold on, let me just say, on short notice, let me just say yes. It's like when you have, we have all these ways of communicating with us, which means I can never find. Hey, there we go. Somebody did a typo and called me cute instead of Curt. Now I'm uncomfortable. Sure, absolutely. I'll plan on 9:15 my time. Cheers. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, starting with question 1. This question, excuse me, I'm still recovering from cold. This question is inspired by this X post. I'm not going to read the X post, where Curt says, "If you understand my work, you'd be far better prepared than most business schools to succeed in business. Can you elaborate on what parts of the work would be the most beneficial for being a successful entrepreneur?"
I meant this in a context because I've said it quite often. I believe that the study of Austrian economics, which is basically behavioral economics, I believe that the study of that is central to one's development of understanding entrepreneurship. In other words, the understanding of incentives. I think my work emphasizes this maintains that emphasis on those sciences, on the methods of behavioral science, but that emphasizes how important truth and reciprocity are, and that truth, sovereignty, and reciprocity. And I found that over time, almost everyone who studies our work is more confident in speaking to customers and vendors and financiers because they develop what I would call clarity. And so you will not, this is the general one. So in general, I believe that understanding human incentives, understanding the sovereignty and reciprocity, puts you in a position where you're a knowledgeable informer and negotiator, or a skilled informer and negotiator. And that unlike certain spheres which emphasize deception, such as international politics or law, as practiced in the United States at least, you will be in a better position to positively influence the direction of your business. You will not make the mistakes most people make in building their business. And you will do what is most important, which is emphasize the satisfaction of a customer base that is self-perpetuating because you have done so by ethical means. Now, the part I'm not saying, and I suppose I should, is if you read The Millionaire Mindset, which I think came out in the 90s, is that when that came out, in the 2000s? The study of people who become wealthy consists of an insight in that most people who become wealthy as entrepreneurs, I'm not talking about financiers or anything like that, right? But as entrepreneurs, do so by moral and ethical, by being more moral and ethical than those they compete with. Essentially, it's a factor of low and long time preference, and that you're trying to build a reputation, because reputations are incredibly important in the filtering of potential customers to different companies, organizations, or individuals. So that's in other words, the development of skills that will lead you to the likelihood of developing wealth, right? The other part is not so much my work, it's more of the stoic and time preference work, which is that most people are most likely to achieve wealth if they take the long term, right? Take the long term strategy, and that they save and invest first.
In other words, pay your future self first.
You pay for yourself first, and you limit your consumption. Now, for many people, this is hard because their work is so fucking boring that they need to use the proceeds of it to entertain themselves. The trick for an entrepreneur is to make your work so not boring that you would rather do it than spend money on sedation, right? Which is what most people do. The fact that you're in control of your life when you are an entrepreneur increases stress. It's actually harder, but it produces mindfulness, because you're gradually, if you do what I'm suggesting, you're gradually in control. Now, people like me, we don't really save money, so to speak. We put everything into the business, grow it as fast as possible, and then take a windfall at the end. In other words, but it's sort of like real estate. You don't get paid so much until you sell a house, right? Well, for an entrepreneur like me, I'm going to build a company, and I know that somewhere between 5 or 6 years, I'm going to sell that and get a windfall, right? That's right. It's just for me, it's easier to do that. And I basically save and invest the windfalls. I may do what I usually do, which is put some of that windfall out of my reach. And that means I use foreign investments. And then I take the rest of the money and I usually roll it into the next company. And that's because I have confidence that I can build companies. That's the sort of end point of how you should think about it. Not something I recommend for everyone. For everyone, I would say take the gradual approach, which works for most people. Um, uh, 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 I'm not saying, I mean, it's not like there aren't other guys like me. There are, but they tend to be people who come from entrepreneurial families, who have some sort of fallback mechanism, who can wait to have a windfall, right? That's a certain kind of person. And because we're from entrepreneurial families, we have a tradition of how all this works. So it's not a stressor, it's just how we grew up. Therefore, for most people, the strategy of paying yourself first, and investing, and then in using what's remaining to invest in the business to grow it at a rate you're comfortable and able to, that is the most likely way to become wealthy in America. There is no comparison. The second most likely way to become comfortable is simply the investment side, paying yourself first and investing. And then there are folks like me who are more risk tolerant, frankly, because we have more options. And of course, there is a class of people that once they have what's called fuck you money, right? They can take even different higher risk positions because they already have a backlog of money that they can rely on for their income. And that's where you see the wealthy, the hierarchy of wealthy guys, from angel investors to minor VCs to major VCs, right? That's where you go. You making money. You're making money by using your money effectively. So when I say you should study my work, it's mostly to prepare you to make those kind of decisions, which is to think about building your business as by understanding incentives. I've written other posts on business, specifically consulting business, but I haven't done that in any more of that in years. So I haven't really addressed it. At present, I'm more largely focusing on how to build your how to get in the right headspace for being an entrepreneur. And I sometimes discuss how to hire A's over B's, B's over C's, C's over D's, what you can hire, how you have to manipulate that as you grow. And I sometimes discuss other things such as, well, I don't want to get into it. I could go down this rat hole for quite a while. So studying my work will generally prepare you for thinking about how about the people who work for you and the people that you sell to, more so than tricks. And I feel like, though business school teaches a lot of tricks, I'm also concerned that business school, as I observe it today, lags more than technology in college lags.
Lags in teaching business practices?
Right. For example, I'm not so confident in the graduate school, the what do you call it, MBA degree, than I used to be. Because the MBA degree, as sold for actually since its large basic inception a couple of decades ago, it was predicated on the boomer growth presumption, which is over now, right? And it secondly was predicated on the post-war invention of marketing and advertising. And so with those customers, that capital and that advertising having shifted, I'm not so sure that what's being done there is as good. What I do like that they do is how they teach it, which is they teach by example. They start you with a company and work from there. I like that. So if you were to separate what I'm emphasizing, what they're emphasizing is, I'm trying to get sort of like how Luke does with Be a Good Human with the foundations. I'm trying to get executives to have the foundations that are most likely to produce organizations that are successful. Once you get to how do you actually practice marketing and finance, etc., whatever. I think once you have that foundation, you'll see those things without the boomer cladding, and then you can benefit from it. But as we know, when I was in business, I had more opportunity to discuss this category of things. And now that we're so focused on politics and law and theory, I just don't write about it as much anymore. I don't write about relationships anymore either, right? I mean, whereas back in the 90s, I wrote about relationships all the time in early 2000s. All right, that's my answer.
All right. Shall we move to question 2?
So the AI tells me this. Say that your work equips entrepreneurs to build with radical clarity, design trust in every transaction, and lead with meritorious authority, and to innovate in real time while always anchoring decisions and narratives. In other words, it's making you to think with clarity about your business, right? In other words, what's the difference between thinking truthfully and with clarity? I mean, there isn't any. Okay.
All right. Question number 2. What are the odds of nuclear warfare not happening this century? Could civilization establish itself again centuries from now if this type of destruction happens?
Well, I don't know the odds, but my understanding is nukes aren't anywhere as destructive as typically presented. And sure, they could destroy a city, but at this point, destroying cities might actually contribute to healing our civilization.
That is a canonical example of a Martin answer.
Yes, I was going to say. Classical Martin. My take is we suffer more from the fears of nukes than the actual damages from nukes, which up until this point, among everything is actually surprisingly small, a fraction, right? And Curt, you lived through the 1950s where all these duck and cover drills and so on. And even when I was growing up, nukes was still somewhat of a concern, although less so, because China was somewhat out of the way. We knew that if USSR and the US goes into nuclear war, it's probably going to cause nuclear winter or whatever, but it wasn't as a big a concern compared to the literature I've read from the 50s and 60s. But I guess the thing comes down to, if a nuke gets dropped, kind of like 9/11, and the city gets wiped out, the rest of the country will still function. You'd be surprised how resilient the human network and the economy is. And that's if we're talking about megaton level nukes. If we're talking about tactical nukes, i.e. those carried in smaller missiles, or I think South Africa even had tactical nukes deployed in, well, no longer deployable because they gave them up. Tactical nukes fired by artillery. I mean, that's just a big bomb used on battlefields.
Okay, I agree entirely. So, you know, it's not like there aren't legions of guys, you know, okay, every major government has what's called a general staff. A general staff is a bunch of people educated in war colleges and usually with field experience who and strategic experience. They're the people, they're the nerds like Norman Schwarzkopf, right? Right. And what they do is they plan for everything that could possibly happen and stick it in a file somewhere. So if something's going to happen, there's a tension rising. They pull out all the files and spread it around to the people who look about it, and they revisit and update their plans, right? And so it's not like there isn't vast amount of research on this subject, right? In general, I have a basic way I look at it, but the general consensus is that with the increase in the number of players, there's an increase in the chance of small scale usage. With the increase in the rapidity and presence of information. Remember, it's not like even the Cuban Missile Crisis where we had fucking satellites and spy planes and shit. It's certainly not like the Second World War where all we had was radar, right? And we had spies, right? And slow communications and telegraphs and radios. I mean, the same reason I say we are doing better at managing the possibility of recessions and depressions is that the likelihood of what do you call it, cyclical self-reinforcement, in other words, cycles of continuous reinforcement of what I would say the stress or panic response. It's like the likelihood of that happening is too low because response times are too high. So my feeling is that large scale is extremely unlikely. And only because we all understand that the only reason to do that is to think, only reason to release everything is to believe that you're going to be exterminated. In other words, it's mutually assured destruction. All right. So large scale seems very low probability of that. Okay. So does that mean that you're going to avoid the probability of limited nuclear war? Maybe not. So if I were to say what the current consensus is, it's that the probability of avoiding nuclear war is around 70%. About, all right, and the reason that it's even that high is not that there's constant threat, it's that there's spikes in threat. And my argument is that spikes in threat with low information rate of transmission increases probability, where spikes in threat with high means of transformation or in the information transmission are much lower, because it's much easier to come to understand what's really going on, and therefore not take the riskier proposition out of ignorance and fear and stress. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure exactly I got it. You mean the way I understood that is you mean the i.e. the 30% probability that we'll have some kind of nuclear exchange between nations this century is due to series of misunderstanding in layman's terms.
Correct. And that's usually the case, but it's more easily ameliorated because it's easier to fucking talk to each other.
Well,
and
yeah. We're in the internet age where the president Trump can just tweet something.
Right. I mean, it's just so you're not hearing from three voices of spies and military people around the fucking cabinet. It's like the fucking information system is saturated with opinions and knowledge. So I think that's why I see it as lower at large scale. Now, does that mean we won't have small scale or limited or whatever, right? That's not clear. We certainly still have a few remaining agrarian age empires with authoritarian leaders in place. And so there is still a greater chance that they will do something out of the attempt to continue the preservation of their way. But otherwise, then the argument here in this article is that that there are still power transitions between U.S., China, Pakistan, and India, and Russia and NATO. I don't see those escalating. Pakistan knows it would be erased. Russia knows it would be erased. China's the outlier, but because they really want to hold onto power and would be willing to sacrifice large numbers of people to do so.
Mao might be. Mao famously said that China does not fear nuclear war, because even if you wipe out half the Chinese, there'll still be a few 100 million around. Right. I'm not sure if she might, because she's like Mao version number 2, right? Mao 2.0. But from all the indication I've seen, the new leaders that are going to replace Xi, even the military general who's basically conducting a coup, they're not insane. Let's put it that way.
Correct.
You don't get to that level of power by being crazy.
Those senior guys, right? Why do they want to fuck it up? I mean,
Well, we've talked about this before. My understanding is that what is it now, 12 years ago, between Xi and Bo Xilai, the other guy who also could have become the CCP chairman, they went with Xi, which is the lesser of the two evils. Turns out long term that he's also pretty damn crazy.
Yeah. I am extremely hopeful, and it's for the not only globally, not for just for us, but not only globally, but I would like to see, of course, the rest of Chinese people get out of poverty. Right, that's part of my wishes. Anyway,
I just want to add one more thing. So, fears nuclear war or pandemic, whatever. For me, I bucket them into this category of availability cascade, i.e., seems so acute, or like the fear is being bitten by sharks, right, or bitten by snakes or whatever. It seems so visceral. It incites a level of fear in us that magnifies it past its probability. Yes, these are just like airplane crashes, nuclear war, bitten by sharks, and so on. these are low probability, high impact events.
Yes.
But it blinds us to the high probability and also high impact events in the long run. I am far more concerned about the collapsing birth rate than I am about nuclear war.
Yes.
Because that's the type of stuff that's happening in the background, just coming to the forefront of what do you call it, popular parlance, and yet it's been happening for decades, and it's not going to reverse anytime soon.
That's correct.
All right, shall we move on?
Yeah, sir. I'm just answering this interview guy.
Okay, question 3. Okay, you ready?
Yes.
Question 3, please deliberate. What is your philosophy of discipline of one's children? Is using physical means, spanking, permissible or not? I've heard some argue that physical discipline, like spanking, is counterproductive because it teaches children to obey out of fear rather than to learn self-control. However, having children myself, I find it near impossible to get them to listen without threat of force behind my commands.
Well, it depends on what kind of child you have. It's great if you have one of those that can be argued into behaving, but if not, self-control out of fear is still self-control and will still get eventually habituated. What I believe to be more important is that punishments aren't applied arbitrarily, but only for making the wrong choice, where the child should have already known not to make it, like rule of law. Take this with some grain of salt. I don't have kids.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Martin on this. I think it's a binary argument is a falsehood. And he's hit it all the way, is that if you haven't had or seen kids with a runaway mind, right? Some kids are like adults. They can be present when you just talk to them. Some kids require adjustment, or influence or overriding in order to get them even pay vague attention to you. And some kids just basically completely lose it. And without heavy external stimuli, they cannot focus. So it all depends on the child. Now the people who write these books, of course, are all the same category of people, so they all believe the same things. But I don't. I mean, I think it's just a sliding scale, as the reason for such things is to uh, override the stimulus, right, to the point where you can actually get them to consider what the consequences of what they're doing. So I think of it as not so much as punishment as
Negative reinforcement.
what?
Negative reinforcement.
Negative reinforcement. So I agree with Martin entirely. One of the people we work with very closely, who we agree heavily with, is the guy who does and his wife who do the Children Don't Need Education.
No, it's kids don't need school.
She's not school,
Yes.
excuse me.
Homeschool Life LLC.
Right.
Jonathan and Adriana Prescott.
Mm-hmm.
But the Prescotts are good examples of traditional European middle class, right? And so I agree with that. If you are possessed of the temperament yourself. But my cousin Robert was a fucking terror, right? And there was just no way getting his attention without something to get his attention, right? And so that worked. I know I was not. I certainly had plenty of the I had Tabasco on my tongue if I said something inappropriate to my mother, right? I had, spanking. I had, the whole range of things. Uh, and the thing that worked for me the most was just my mother's disapproval or torturing my autism by making me stand in a corner, face the wall, right? Fear does work. It does work if that's what's needed. But to claim all children don't need that, and I'm not trying to be racist, it's just the examples I know. If you've ever seen young black boys in a fucking store, I mean, mom just cannot get control of them. Some, not all of them. I'm just saying there's some these children, they're somewhat like that. When we see a white kid do that, we just think they're screwed up, right? But any child can demonstrate these behaviors just by being tired, because when you're tired, your capacity for regulation goes down. So as always, Martin's right, and I don't have any particular thing to add other than I don't believe in the all or nothing. I think I spanked my son twice, and his reaction was like I cut off his head or something. Right? But it was the only way to get him out of his sort of tantrum state. All right, what's next?
Okay, question 4. Please deliberate. What is Curt and the Institute's position on same-sex couples being allowed to adopt children? Personally, this goes against my moral intuition. I feel children have a right to both maternal and paternal care and attention.
Well, as always, I don't claim to represent Institute's positions. I represent mine. Now, I agree with you. None of it was motivated by what's good for children and society at large. They have been turned into another product. Allowing surrogacy where new children are created just to be given away makes it clear and eliminates the argument about making the best of a bad situation that was at least arguable, though still doubtful for adoption.
Yeah, I want to emphasize the Institute doesn't have a position. We can only argue the positions. Martin's correct. I would say that to argue the position is that the child has no volition in the matter, number one. Secondly, that homosexual relationships are far less durable than even the decreasingly durable heterosexual relationships. So I'm not keen on an involuntary extra genetic relationship, and I'm certainly not keen on increasing the risk of essentially single parenthood in a demographic that is artificial. In other words, the purpose of the family, the purpose of marriage, and certainly reproduction is to divide the labor of intergenerational production. On the other hand, so if there's a shortage of population, I don't like this. I'm fully supportive of find some guy to donate sperm and then it's yours and you're carrier, right? I mean, do it that way. I think that's fantastic. I'm not sure I am okay with it. I'm not sure I favor adoption because of what I've mentioned. I'm not. I'm openly against calling homosexual relations marriage. They are not for They are not for the production of children. Even though this is how the homosexual marriage got worked its way in with the public, is through saying that they want to have children. Well, they want to build families. that was a smart strategy, and it appears to have worked. On the other hand, I would say that, there's two vaginas there, so get somebody to donate and have them yourselves rather than adopt them. We're not in a world where we have an oversupply of children for adoption that are not coming from environments where they were challenged in the first place. In other words, you have a lot of it's not like 100 years ago, if you were fooling around with a farm boy next door, you moved away to a distant city, had the child, gave it to the church, and then came back, right? But it was not a process that was meant that you were a drug user from serial drug users or from almost exclusively from the lower classes. So those are my opinions, my judgments on it. The Institute doesn't. The Institute's only position is that we should not be calling a marriage that is not between a man and a woman for the purpose of intergeneral production of the family as first institution of a civilization. And you can call it anything else. I mean, basically, a marriage consists of an exchange of an all but unlimited power of attorney and a formation of a corporation into which they both place all their assets for a shared benefit. So civil unions are wonderful. I don't like and didn't like the calling it marriage. That's just me, though. But then all the Institute cares about is truthful representation.
Yeah, I don't even support donating to lesbians in the way you said, unless you first correct them of their error.
As you know, I am more libertarian than you are. But that, as you know, that is a very Anglo-Christian disposition. So I think both of our opinions on this are worth having. Okay. What's the next one?
Question 5. Pre-Christian Europe was widely known to have harsh eugenics, whether it was imposed externally through the constant churn from wars or internally from selection practices. The advent of Christianity to Europe imposed a new social standard that gave more plight to underclass. It's also embedded load-bearing messages that institutionalized the sterilization of our warrior ethos. The criteria for who lives and who doesn't, along with who can breed and who will never breed, have been fundamentally altered by Christianity. The selection process has been changed from the historical norm, so we are technically moving away from our origins the longer we remain Abrahamized. My question is, can there be a legitimate case that Christianity is soft dysgenics at best?
Well, I think Christianity is mostly just malleable, and for most of history coexisted with the warrior class at helm, and dysgenics are a relatively recent phenomenon. Now, if you want to argue that such values were always there and couldn't be expressed before abundance resulting from Industrial Revolution, maybe there's some truth there. I don't know.
Martin, I'm sorry I was distracted. Can you let me? I don't think I understand the question. It certainly didn't sterilize the warrior ethos. That was World War One. It tried to produce an ethos that included the ancient world in Europe consisted of those people who were from the warrior castes, which was largely the property owning castes, and they were under the aristocratic tradition that treated the underclasses or conquered people as slaves, but was probably closer to useful domesticated animals. I'm sure in their minds that was the case, in the sense of their metaphysical premises. They did have rules for caring for these slaves, right? You weren't supposed to really abuse them or anything, but they did not treat them as equals. What Christianity did was gave these underclasses who were not strong, were not influential, were not from money, were not educated, did not have strong family networks. It allowed the weaker people in society to form a virtue system that was compatible with aristocracy, and somewhat of a competitor to it, so that it was possible for them to have self-image status and a membership in the community, which they were previously othered from. So Christianity solved a purpose that would normally have been and was being solved at the time through the gradual development of wealth, the increase, quite large increase in what we would consider the middle class, and the subsequent demand for labor and treating people as customers. The basic difference in the Western ethos over time is that because of our commercial orientation, we tend to treat people with indeterminacy, meaning that everybody's a potential customer in some way, whether it be friendship, commons production, potential marriage, or commerce. So in that sense, I just don't agree with this take here. I do agree with eugenics being practiced by essentially the caste system at the top, if not the bottom. And it was, of course, a harsh environment. And once we had the 10th or 11th century, our aggressive use of genetic pacification, all of these things, starvation, law, class segmentation, all of this led to maintained a pretty substantial eugenics program. My understanding of it, it's largely because of the upward redistribution of resources, in particular food, led to starvation at the bottom more so than the top. And so that by the time we are out of the into the early modern period, the increase in reproduction of the genetic middle class, not the economic, but the genetic middle class, which is the core, had pretty much had spread down to the lower classes simply because of land shortages. So I'm not really sure how to answer this question within its frame. The end question is, the selection process has been changed from the historical norm, so we are moving away from our origins. the longer we remain Abrahamized? Probably yes. I think that the great filter problem was that the eugenics program was necessary, and that because of the Germans, it got cut. This is a big mistake because you can see in all the data that we're in genetic decline. So in other words, we're in the process of reduction to the ancestral mean simply by the asymmetry of reproduction and the asymmetry of survival. I mean, modern medicine has all but ended the fact that, of child mortality. And so is that a good thing? Well, it's a good thing if you're a parent, but it's not a good thing depending upon your genes. You combine that with our saturation of the environment with all sorts of chemistry and molecules that are not really helpful to our neural maturity, and certainly appear to be doing some job on our cancers. I don't think that's a pretty good thing, but it's pretty obvious just in the decline of IQ that we're seeing. So, all right. So I'm not. So when I go to it, I'm going to say Martin is. I said a lot of words reinforcing what Martin said, and I'd have to disagree with the framing that was put forth in the question.
I think the core framing for the question really is the last sentence. Is there a legitimate case that Christianity is soft dysgenics at best, i.e. it's not eugenic, right? There's no neutral. And
right. It was a compensation for an era where, 50% of your kids don't make it to age 8 or something, So I understand the need for, and shit, I forgot one of the main points, and I had it in my head. I got to hit this point, is that we forget that that the reason for feudalism at the end of after the Roman collapse, the reason for feudalism is because there weren't enough workers. And so you put them into serfdom because otherwise everybody'd starve. So when you're living in a world where there aren't enough workers and you have high child mortality, the church is just being practical. And then as the church evolved into the largest renter, landowner in Europe, or 50% of the land was held by the church. The church needed the revenue, etc., because tithes are just taxes, right? And so the church needed the revenue, and it needed the employees, the pays, right? So I just I would say yes, the Christian ethic is a problem in some sense in this one, but only if it interferes with eugenics. And my understanding is the progressives, and they are progressives, an outgrowth of New England women Christians, and the progressives were heavily focused on eugenics. It wasn't until the Nazis came along in the post-war Jewish terror and such a things that this became an issue for us.
the way I think about this is maybe a lot more straightforward. To answer, the question at the end, which is, can there be a legitimate case that Christianity solves eugenics at best? As I look at it from a European history perspective, for most of the past 2,000 years, Europe has been, let's just 1500, right? European has been Christian.
Yep.
If Christianity is soft dysgenics, then we should see in those past 1500 years a gradual dysgenic decline. But instead, up until the cusp of the 1950s, what we've seen is actually eugenics.
Correct.
So I think that's a valid argument against this
I
case.
think it's like at the end of 19th century it starts going down.
Mhm.
I think industrialization and availability of food and pharmaceuticals ironically is far more dysgenic, has
Yes.
far more dysgenic effect than Christianity did.
Yep. Okay, what's next?
I wanted to add that I see treating others as customers as part of the problem, that it doesn't recognize the asymmetry of agency, which you at least recognize towards domestic animals.
I'd have to think about that, Martin, because the way I thought I was expressing it was that there was a greater likelihood you would engage in high trust behavior.
Of course, the idea I see treating others as fellow soldiers.
Yes, correct. But not everybody's a soldier. I agree with you. I mean, you're right. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying that you can see the pattern worldwide that it takes the development of a middle class in order to be able to get yourself out of the low trust polity. I mean, what's her name is out there talking about this today. I actually kind of like her, a Russian historian. She said that Russia's still essentially a low trust polity, and they've given each other good reason to be. But the real answer is that you only get a high trust polity after you've built a majority middle class.
But doesn't trust come before middle class?
It's an incremental process, right? I mean, the whole argument is you do what you said, which you start with the military. The military, in order to create order, imposes law, right? Law facilitates the commerce and the taxes that result from commerce to pay the military and the state, right? And so that's the state, that's the military, the state, the military, and the judicial objective is to produce an economy, and the more trust in the economy, meaning the more capacity to take risk over long time frames, with less and less certainty. That's just in the state and military's interest. I think what you are probably referring to is the tendency of that monetary financial sector to develop an interest that is contrary to the evolution of every other interest. In other words, the state, the military, the people, and the economy. My feeling is the problem is always and everywhere the bifurcation of the financial sector from the state, whereas I'm sort of in favor of limited bifurcation of the relationship between the state and any kind of faith or any kind of church, education. I'm not in favor of the treasury being as ours is effectively privately held, because that just means that the people are financing the private sector, and that the financial sector, and the financial sector is an unaccountable governance.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's something we've been arguing for forever. But I tend, when you talk about this commercial ethic, Martin, that's where I see the problem. And it could just be that I'm wrong, but I don't see the ethic of high trust exchange and cooperation being contrary to anything that you've sort of desired for. I see the financial sector and its essential greed, right, being the one that is disconnected from the feedback loop of what we would like, which is a monarchy's long-term attempt to persist the people. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's that you need the monarchy we need to get collapsed financial sector into service of the state. I think we might get what you're looking for out of that. Maybe not as disciplined as you'd like it, the way I think about it, but I think that's where I see the problem that I hear you talk about all the time. It's also where Brad sees it, by the way. I don't know if you know that. Brad agrees with you on most things.
I know.
What?
I know. I've been treating when you view someone as a customer, your responsibility towards him is quite limited only to that exchange.
I don't take it that way. Only if I think, Curt, I'm going to say something, or if I think a customer in your parlance means someone that you've established long-term relationship with, that you're going to do repeated business. Whereas a customer in Martin's, how Martin interpreted this, you do this deal with them once and you never see them again.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you do build a relationship, it's built around what's profitable for you.
Yeah, the problem is that leads to Jewish ethics of the bazaar. So the real issue is the spectrum of what you're calling commerce, marriage, and commons. And so when I'm talking about treating people as customers, I'm looking at all three markets. And I have studied quite a bit how hard it is to produce the village effect and to expand it beyond the village, and how hard that is, and how much law it requires to suppress all the advantages that come out from people that emerge as populations scale. So I can't imagine you want to live in a Middle Eastern bazaar economy. I can imagine, but you would certainly like to live in a National Socialist economy. So would I, for that matter. But you have to have a hierarchy of apparatuses to make that happen, and I don't think you can do that without high trust. And high trust appears to be something you produce by law on one hand and utility on the other, and it's the extension, like Christianity says, Christianity's principle is the extension of kinship love to non-kin. Well, that's essentially the same thing for in economics and politics, the extension of kinship love to non-kin. Well, I mean, it's not that you love another person, it's that you're not going to harm that person in a trade. You're going to seek reciprocity in that trade. So I disagree with the oversimplification, because it all it does is generate demand for authority, and lower the radius and volume of cooperation. So I think you have to look at it as a general behavior that people don't have to separate. We could make the same argument for the separation of faith and reality. I'm a Christian in the sense that, I talk to God every fucking day, right? But I'm not. But if you ask me about it, I'm going to give you the scientific answer, right? No matter what, and that's a duality that I'm able to preserve. Most people can't preserve that duality. And so the minute you restore a duality, like this is my family, right, and you're in a trade, and then I'm not responsible for the rest of society, then what you're doing is you're causing that person to have a single mode um, that isn't in favor of the polity, that's purely in favor of the family and self. And then you're down to Islam or Judaism. So I don't see it that way. As far as I can tell, it's not a choice. People need a precognitive habit that's a metaphysical premise. All right, and all civilizations develop that premise. And so my argument is that we're trying to, and this is the weakness. I mean, you're right in this sense. The weakness of Western civilization is that we have so inculcated ourselves with Christian love beyond ourselves, with treating everyone as a customer, and treating all polity as an extended family. This is what's led to this fucked up universalism that you're always justifiably complaining about. It's because that's our metaphysical premise. My view is I'd like people to have that metaphysical premise in group and not out group, right? Except that it certainly leads to federations. So I view it as the law's job is to protect us against the metaphysical presumption that makes most of us treat everyone else as under the high trust ethic. Meanwhile, the law doesn't permit us to use that unwittingly against others outside.
Yeah, the way I think of it is this: it's Christianity ethics, you turn the other cheek, and so on. Its applicability has limits, and its limit, i.e., its boundaries within the boundary afforded by the protection of law. And what I mean by the protection of law is if the law can punish defectors, and that's where the boundary is. So, i.e., if Christianity extended to outside the limit of the law, i.e., the law cannot punish defectors, then that'll violate natural law and actually cause a decrease in trust rather than an increase in trust.
I mostly seek to recreate conditions in which trust emerges, and if you having to use law, then that suggests those conditions are already failing. Not that you shouldn't have the law, of course you should. But having the trust emerge on its own should be the priority.
I don't think trust can naturally emerge without the law in some form. And you can even say at the tribal, at the village level, right? Instead of calling it law, call it traditions and norms, which is proto version of the law. But in this person's dilemma game, you have to have some way of punishing defectors. Otherwise, how can trust evolve in that environment?
Yeah, I'm thinking about scale where reputation matters and the problems that emerge when you move away from
Martin, are you sure you're not a libertarian?
Does this sound libertarian?
This is the trouble I always have. Like, the less sophisticated likes to put labels on everybody, whether you're libertarian or Rothbardian, or whatever, this and or something else, or Nazi or whatnot. But it's far more nuanced. The reality is far more nuanced. I don't think there is a single variable name, for lack of better words, that describe each and every one of us.
No.
Or describe each and every one of our stance.
All right, where are we?
All right, we have finished question 5. Question 6. I understand Curt's view of religion pretty well, I think, and I agree with it. But practically, if you, Curt, were made dictator of America tomorrow, what would you enshrine into law regarding religion? You said, quote, in your parenthesis in your podcast of choice and perhaps elsewhere, that you'd like to see Christianity made the state religion so as to prohibit competitor religions. But you've also said Christianity is wrapped in falsehood. How practically might we enshrine scientific/Jeffersonian Christianity so as to make it both sufficiently Christian to qualify as Christianity to appease the Christians, but still eliminate the falsehoods? What does it even mean practically to outlaw Christian falsehoods, like prohibiting teaching Old Testament in literal sense, or chopping off the Old Testament completely and forcing Christians to become Marcionites? Parentheses, personally, that sounds good to me, but most would obviously object.
All right. I can go over this again because I think I heard something in your reading I didn't in my original reading of it. Okay. All right. There's a couple of I'm gonna split this up. I gotta edit the question spacing a little bit so I answer it correctly. There's 3 basic questions here. All right. First, the Christianity is already rationally expressed in the natural law. It's largely right, or that the Christian theologians, specifically the scholastics, made the church religion compatible with Aristotelian law. All they did was say it wasn't natural evolution. They said it was God's domain, which was, whatever. So if I were a dictator and tomorrow, or I would say that Christianity is one of the religions in the West. Secular humanism is another, and what remains of our ancestral pagan tradition is another. Now, I've grown up with all 3 of these. I think that early Disney was essentially persisting our religious narrative, our Germanic religious narratives, which is why it was so successful at the time. Secular humanism has obviously become the decent person's religion, so to speak, and Marxism has become the bad person's religion. So I would say that you need to be that the state religion was Christianity, and that all natural European religions are acceptable because they're all compatible. Now, Christians may not think they're compatible, but they are. Christianity is largely in doctrine the restatement of Plato in supernatural terms instead of ideal terms. So I would make it the state religion. So, and that any version of Christianity that is compatible with natural law is acceptable, right? Is included in that. I would say that, and so secular humanism is essentially Christianity in secular terms. All right, so I would mention the spectrum there, so that people understood it. I would say that it's true that when I say Christianity is wrapped in falsehoods, it means that it's a theological grammar and that those theological grammars are false. False as argument, but true as analogy. And so my problem with Christian doctrine in law is that it's analogy, not description. And so if we claim that the ethic is the same regardless of which grammar is used, and we claim that the law, natural law, which is compatible with Christianity, the natural law is consistent whether God is outside the universe, of the universe, within the universe, or a product of man, then we have a set of criteria for testing and limiting Christianity to those things that are not too absurdly ridiculous. However, the reason to do that is more important, is to define hostile religions. Because we've had the separation of church and state since Jesus said it, as deliver unto Caesar, reality, versus deliver unto God, right? And so this is an ancient, but that's not true of most other religions. It's certainly not true of Islam, and Judaism, which is specifically hostile to the concept. So I would say that we can outlaw any religion we want because it's incompatible with our religion, right? But that is different from the state. That is different from the state creating
Is this a case where let's just outlaw the bad,
correct,
and then you can believe whatever good you want to believe?
Correct.
You can practice Stoicism if you want.
Right. So wait a minute, I'm not done. I need to finish the arc, otherwise it'll bait different arguments. So but there are grammars, right? So we have the secular humanistic grammar, right? We have the scientific grammar. I mean, fundamentally, the natural law is an expression of it, right? I mean, so we have the natural law, we have a scientific or rational grammar. We have secular humanism, which is a faith, right? We have the spectrum of Christianities from loose to fundamental. We have the what remains of our Germanic pagan religions, and we have at least a historical grasp of our Mediterranean religions, right? The pagan religions, or other pagan religions. So you can't just say it's just Christianity. You have to say it's the European tradition. What I think is missing is the natural religion, which I think I addressed somewhere in here somewhere. What's missing is our natural religion, which is much closer to German paganism, combined with, well, I mean, I guess they're all three the same, but natural religion is just ancestor, nature, ancestor, and nature, hero, and ancestor worship. Because the reason the religious devotion works is you're creating a debt response, which causes a submission response. Scientifically, that's what you're feeling when you're in a submissive state, submitting to a religious doctrine. You're provoking a debt response. So a natural religion would emphasize the debts you have to those who have created your condition by a group evolutionary strategy. And so you would simply do intergenerational transfer of the long-term debt as a religion. I mean, that's the scientific view of what religion is for. Now, that's because religion serves a function just like the 3 layers of ethics do. Religion serves training your intuition before you're capable of reason. It also serves training your religion if you're incapable of reason. And so the purpose of religion is to train your intuition. Well, you can't do that rationally. You do it through storytelling. The next level is you rationalize some of your storytelling. The next level is you empiricize it. The next level is you science it. So people need a distribution of those things, not only because they're only capable of those things at different ages, but because some people never rise beyond that capacity. Highly empathic people are very dependent upon a submissive structure that's very clear to them and can felt intuitionistically. Highly rational people, I mean, I'm certainly your highly rational person, is you were dependent upon actual understanding of the reasons that survive criticism over time. So, a population needs a group in order to persist a group strategy. A population needs a religion, and a religion that satisfies the empathizing to systematizing spectrum, and satisfies the childhood or infantile, whatever, childhood to wise and spectrum, and satisfies what's probably the approximate equal to that is the 80 IQ to 150 IQ spectrum. So it's false to see you don't need religion. The problem is, a natural religion is true, and a natural law as a religion is true, and the science of human behavior is true. The problem is you need a way to encode that in narrative that will work for the people. And so the problem I have with Christianity is it encodes it in Semitic slave doctrine. And I don't think that's good for our people. And so it's worse when you have fundamentalists trying to apply their frame to a thing like law. And so, which is really, they're meant to be opposites. They should overlap, but they're meant to be opposites. So I would say that Christianity in a reformed or scientific form is an exceptional state religion, because its emphasis is on trust building. That way, you're not imposing it as a dictator, right? But as a lawgiver that's satisfying the group strategy. I like it also as a state moral grammar, right? It's nice to fall back on fairy tales, so to speak, that you understood as a child, which provoke your intuitions that were trained by these stories before you were capable of reason. It's very powerful. I don't think my goal would be, or if I was a dictator, right, is to make everyone believe the same grammar, but it's to make the behavior universal regardless of the grammar. And so what I would do is prohibit hostile religions, and frankly, other than Buddhism, some sort of Buddhism, most of them are hostile. And which is why I say, I care at the scale of this country more that you're Christian than your race. Right? I know races are important, but my concern is that you've come up through a culture of long-term Christian participation, and if you can't do that, I think you're going to have a hard time being in any level of population a body of people that's contiguous with the Western tradition. So I'd prohibit hostile religions. The one I'm concerned, Judaism, we're sort of integrating, right? You don't like
No,
that.
no,
No, I in America, there.
no.
Okay, all right, all right. I'll go
How,
with Mark being
Americans have become more Jewish, we could say.
right. Okay.
how can you incorporate Judaism given that it's from my understanding, a
No, I'm
religion?
not saying incorporating Judaism. I'm saying there are a significant number of Jews
Sure.
who are integrating because of largely intermarriage over generations.
They're
Uh,
integrating, but do they carry their hostile religion with them? Or are they giving up on their hostile religion?
they're giving up on their hostile religion.
Okay. Well, then that's fine.
Right. The problem with Islam is they don't do that.
Hmm.
And they don't do that partly because they can't, and they can't because the IQ distribution in Islam is too low, and the metaphysical demands are too high. So I would absolutely positively prohibit Islam. I would call for taking down of all public examples of it, and I would certainly dismantle all mosques because a mosque is essentially a territorial claim. I would go so far as to say, if necessary, I would insulate the Western civilization from the use of Arabic, um, and prohibit all reference to it. I mean, I'd do a Albigensian crusade against it because it's fucking evil. I mean, essentially, Chinese. That's what Chinese are doing. Um, Only the Europeans are stupid enough not to do this.
Well,
Though
that's
the
because Europeans, the European, what do you call it? The politicians have adopted secular humanism
correct.
as a religion and not recognizing the hostile nature of Islam.
Because they're controlled by Judaists.
Oh, there you go.
I dismantle every synagogue and Holocaust museum for all the same reasons.
So Martin, can I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm testing something. So until we had a lot of Eastern European Jews come here in the post-war period, work their way through the academic and education system, and then into the media, because they're a talking class, right? That's what they do. The Southern Jews in particular, they were having Christmas trees and joining country clubs and the whole fucking thing. So they were fully integrated. The only difference that my friend Mickey says, the only difference was that we had a 6-pointed star on our Christmas tree instead of a 5-pointed star. And we put our menorah of candles in the window. But fundamentally, we were integrating well. This hostility of Eastern European Jews in the post-war period, that appears to have been the hard part. So I'm agreeing with you in the sense that I don't like the practice of a religion that is basically, its goal is to dismantle the West hierarchy so that they can rule through finance, right? I agree with that, and that they're actually hostile to us because of the femininity of their social structure that they would like to make universal. So I mean, I understand that. On the other hand, as I said, we bought and paid for them, dude. It's been expensive. So why can't we, if we're gonna bring in IQ points, why can't we integrate those IQ points even if it's expensive? And I would say that that's a luxury only the U.S. could afford. But I'm willing to be wrong, and I'm not hung up on it. I'm not as committed to it as everyone else, and that might be because I have a good number of Jewish friends I'm pretty close to who are effectively secular humanists, and they are all their criticism of Judaism is approximately equal to mine. So what my one of my best friends, he says, I grew up on Conan, not on the Talmud. and and that's and he's like, yeah, well, he'll say, well, that's the Jewish part of me being effeminate, and he'll say that shit, right? So do I want those guys to not be here? No, I fucking love this guy, right? Because he's going to raise his kids in that sort of vein. But I don't want, I wouldn't like him to say, well, he doesn't have, he's not ethnically or genetically Jewish. I mean, he is. He's, the kind with the red hair, the big round heads. I love the fucking guy. I mean, deeply. And he's an asset to our people, right? But he's not out there trying to undermine us. And I think political Jews are a terrible problem. But I don't see that as true for, all the people I knew. My mother had a best friend, a Jewess. She works at Wesleyan University. I've spent a little bit of time with her, and she just fucking hates white people. Absolutely hates us with a passion. And white men in particular. And so I'm like, I don't want that woman in this country. I want her fucking out of here. It's the same thing for Muslims that think that they need to spread Islam. So those people don't belong here. I mean, if you want the benefits of the country, there need to be things that you are taking an oath to. And if getting rid of white people or replacing their civilization while you parasitically exist off it,
it's an ultimate. What's the word? Shoot.
Treason?
No. It started with an H. Gosh, I'm at a loss for words. Hypocrisy. Ultimate hypocrisy.
Yeah, it's a hypocrisy. So
Well, it's not a hypocrisy if you don't pretend to be a universalist.
wait a minute, I didn't get that.
Like, are you a hypocrite if you don't treat your enemies same as your friends?
No.
Well,
Oh, okay. No, it's he means it as Francis means it differently. He means that you're sitting here taking advantage of this civilization and benefiting from it, but you're actually seeking to undermine it. Well, if you thought it was that bad, you'd go back to your own country and live the lifestyle you prefer there. I mean, no matter where the beliefs of a people are the result in the civilization they live in.
They would not be a hypocrite if they openly declare, well, we're here waging war on you.
Yes, correct.
But no, that's not what they're saying. They enjoy all that. They would much rather. So if they go live out in the desert of Nevada somewhere and try to create their own, Al Qaeda base or whatnot and wage war on the rest of the country, I wouldn't call them a hypocrite.
Correct.
But if they live and enjoy all the benefits of Western civilization and still claim that where they come from or their culture or religion is being superior, and while enjoying all this, not willing to go back to whatever shithole they came from, that's being a hypocrite.
If you don't like it, get the fuck out. It's my attitude. And one of the reasons I say the Constitution is incomplete, but it doesn't list the things it doesn't list that you must take an oath, right, for citizenship. You must take an oath to do these things. You didn't have to do it, or did you have?
No, I did have to take an oath.
So
A pledge of allegiance.
Huh?
I think it was a pledge of allegiance.
Yeah, and I don't think the Constitution is detailed enough for what we expect of people who are.
This is actually a great segue into question 7 if we have the time. So question 7, which is very simple. What is an American?
Okay, I've read most of Martin's answers before we started this. I haven't read this, but this is going to be juicy.
I just wrote my own response to it.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
Martin wants to go first.
Americans themselves will have to decide it. I will only offer my views on ethnos in general. Most obvious answer is to treat it as synonymous with ethnicity, but this has its limits, which America in particular demonstrates very well. Even if we declare that only Anglo-Saxons are Americans and everyone else is just visiting, are those who stayed in England or those in Canada and Australia Americans? Clearly, there has to be some point of ethnogenesis where the population becomes distinct, probably correlating with state formation. This is still not an argument for civic nationalism. After the nation is formed, it is what it is, and you're either part of it or you're not. There's no joining a nation you were not born into. It can be that one of your ancestors was a foreigner who married into American ethnos, and you're now mixed enough that you're marginally indifferent from a full American, of course.
Okay, so I'm going to give an answer that will probably show my bias. So
I love that.
I
Yes.
define an American as a person who has decided for his or her family and decided to reside in the continent of the U.S., who is willing and able to defend and contribute to the politics collective capital in all forms, parentheses, physical, normative, genetic, etc., and renounce loyalty to all other peoples, polities, and religions.
Yep. That would be correct. I would say that's correct. I would say Martin's also correct. I would say that the country is designed for Francis's answer, and I would say humanity is designed for Martin's answer, or evolved for Martin's answer.
Well, the American founders designed it for my answer.
Yeah, I suspect so.
Yes, that's probably true, isn't it? Is that true?
Yes, it's in the Constitution. For ourselves and our posterity.
I'm thinking about the early debates about Jews, and they were very welcoming.
Well, they made an error.
Well, but then, where would you place the Irish Scottish by that definition?
Well, like I said, you just there's some point of ethnogenesis, and you can include them, but at that point they have to cease to be Irish.
So my view is that Europe is quite a diverse place, and that we are unified by common history, common religion, relatively common culture. Culture is probably too far to take it. And common interest. And that the difference is at present that people tend, not exclusively, but tend to be different within their territories, which is an ancestral evolution. I would say that given what I see as the great migration in the US, the same thing is going to happen here. I would say that is going to happen, less so than Europe. But Europe is failing to centralize, and America is beginning to decentralize to match Europe. And you have to do that. It's just, you can't have differences and not decentralize. Now, in volume 1, I talk about this at length, which is the tendency of all civilizations to gradually centralize, or all states, to gradually centralize to produce cooperative capacity and then to decentralize for regional advantage while preserving the utility of the centralization. So this sinusoidal process has gone out through history, and I don't see it changing. I see that Europe is proving that you can't, you can only federate, and I think America is proving that you can only federate, and we're doing it from two different directions. America from creating the American Empire between 1890 and 1910 or 14, and it's reaching its limits. And that's because, I mean, we only settled parts of this country in the early part of the 20th century, you know. And so that is that regionalism is certainly taking profoundly deep roots, and that's because we've solved the cooperation at scale problem through our institutions. But that the choice to make an imperial America, largely to get Europe out of the hemisphere, was successful at the time, but that at present we're seeing the refragmentation of the country back into what would be a demand for regions and states, just like Europe. And so just as I see Europe going through a re-federalization and decentralization in their attempt, which is happening, I see America going through the same process. And one of the reasons Martin and I worked on the law, and my concern was that it was a set of menu choices, because I expected this to happen. And I don't want to say, yes, you're going to build a fucking up, because it's not going to work. Federations in Europe are great. I would love it if the Anglosphere formally federated. I would love it if the Intermarium in Europe would formally federate. I can't see France and Germany ever formally federating. I think it's got to be one or the other. It's the central power. But I would expect it's going to be Germany that wins that battle. So these federations are very valuable. I would see that the rest of the world heading toward federations, because you get the best of both worlds. You get scale in military, geopolitics, military, and trade dealings, while you get small scale advantage of polities that suit local and regional interests. So I see that as the natural continuation of the direction, unless there is some fucking catastrophe. I didn't finish with our nuclear. I'm just going to close with our nuclear argument. Is, in general, it would take 100 to 300 years to recover from a substantial nuclear war. It would take a long fucking time. It would suck. Anyway, so that's what does it mean to be an American? In practice, I think it's Francis's argument is how we are currently organized, and it is not. And the left had made a third level to this. So I say Martin is the low level, correct. Francis is the current civic nationalist position, and I think that the left was trying to make a globalist position by not requiring people to integrate, so that they could produce an authoritarian central government by generating the conflict necessary to resolve differences. Which would again disempower the West.
Integration has always been largely a myth.
I agree. But Europe did an interesting thing. Of course, Europe spread micro groups all over the place, and then once Napoleon came about, the nationalist thing came into place, and most people moved back to their countries of origin. I don't see why that, I don't see why that was a surprise to us, because it created a form of duress. Napoleon reinvented the total war state. Hadn't existed since Napoleon, since the Romans, and he had the requisite result. So I don't know. In the end, under duress, we generally favor our kin, and under prosperity, we are forgiving. And so it depends on what the future holds. I'm with Francis but I don't really give a shit as long as you come here and join in. The problem is you have to be able to, and so far, we have the model minority that seems to be able to, and we have the not model minorities that don't seem to be able to, and I think that's just going to play out deterministically, as Martin is suggesting.
Well, I'm not an American, so it's not up to me. I would call Francis a welcome guest who's welcome to stay as long as he wants.
So what's next year?
Well, we're out of time.
I have another. What's the Let me see here. All right. I answered question 10, by the way, in a post that I put on Twitter. But so we can just go back to that next time.
Awesome.
All right, thank you, everyone. This is Francis, Martin, and Curt for the Natural Institute. It is Friday, August 15th, 2025. We covered how many questions?
7.
7, which is pretty good, right?
It seems to be our normative, average.
Average, all right.
If we're efficient at it.
I think we did pretty good. I did feel like it was a Martin day, which makes me happy. Thank you everyone for watching. Please look for the link in the description, and please follow us on YouTube.
We may be slow, but eventually we get through all the questions. Just gotta work methodically at it.
So the list grows significantly faster than we're going through them.
Like I said, eventually we'll get to it.
What was that, Martin? I didn't hear it.
The list is growing much faster than we are moving through it.
Yes. Well, that's a good thing if we're getting great questions.
Well,
but somebody might want to get their question answered in a timely manner.
Well, that's why you become a subscriber, and you can join the sessions and get in front of the queue.
Yes. All right. Love you guys. Thanks, everyone. I already did my closing, right? So we'll see you next time.
Yep. Bye, everybody.